So with Social Security, well, a lump sum would probably cost the government too much. It would just be a cash flow disaster. So the idea is the same. Take the obligation off of the government's books. So in other words, when I turn 67, they don't owe me anything. I'm walking away. I don't want the checks. I don't want the Social Security checks. Well, how do I come out ahead? They've got to give me something. Then I said, well, I wonder if the math would work on this because I'm 44. So I've got 23 years. What if they just cut my payroll tax just a little bit every year? And then I promise to invest that in the stock market. And I ran the math in the spreadsheet. And it turns out that I think there's a wide range of possible deals we could make where we trim that payroll tax down a little bit each year. I promise to invest it. And I'm actually going to come out ahead once I turn 67 with that money I invested on my own versus what I was scheduled to get in Social Security benefits. So it's a win-win. Now, for the government, it's also going to be a win-win in the long run. For Social Security as a program, it's a win-win in the long run because if people start doing this right now, well, in let's say 15 years, you'll have a growing number of people who are no longer receiving Social Security checks.
Welcome to InFi, the future of finance.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the InFi podcast. Today, I'm pleased to be speaking with Tyler Watts, who has a PhD from George Mason University, but got his BA from Hillsdale College. And I was an economics professor when he was going through as a student, and we talk about that briefly in the beginning of this episode. But he has a proposal to save Social Security. It's a win-win approach where people can opt out, and it's better for them. That's why they do it, and it's better for the government too in terms of its finances. And so that's what he's here to talk about. This has been put out by the Indiana Policy Review Foundation, where he is an adjunct scholar, and Tyler also is a professor of economics at Ferris State University. So I think I've given enough prelude, and I think you guys will get a lot out of this episode. Here we go. Tyler, welcome to the InFi podcast.
Great to be with you, Bob.
So we were chatting before we hit the record button here, but for the benefit of the people at home, can you explain, is that your uncle or so on the wall there? Who is that?
No, that's probably the greatest economist of all time, Ludwig von Mises. And my brother, who's a wonderful artist, and actually the person who got me into economics to begin with, Joel Watts, my brother out in Colorado, he got me into economics with the Freeman and reading Walter Williams op-eds in the newspaper back when I was a teenager. And when I became a professor, that was kind of his gift for me when I entered academia. So that's one of my most prized possessions.
Yeah, that's a great one. So you're here today talking about, you have a study from Indiana Policy Review on a way to fix Social Security. So that's what we're going to be talking about, folks. And I see an op-ed that you had promoting the study. And let me just read a quick paragraph here, try to summarize.
Before we get into that, I wanted to say something quickly about us. I was undergrad student at Hillsdale College, and you came on board faculty. And I don't think I ever really had your class, but we did have some interactions. And I have to give you some credit here because you invited me and I think maybe one or two other upperclassmen students to come and guest teach in a principal's class. So I think I have to give you some credit and some recognition for helping launch my academic career, even though at that time I had no idea that I would end up teaching econ for a living. So,
okay. Well,
to Bob Murphy for helping me.
Oh, that's glad to hear. Yeah, I knew we did have the Hillsdale background, and then I'm glad you said that because I was thinking I know him, but I don't remember ever teaching him. And
it's been a while. That was almost exactly 20 years now.
Okay, well, very good. Okay, so yeah, there you go, folks. It's a small club of the Austrian world. It's getting bigger, but yes. The further back you go, the smaller the group. The elite, all starting with Mises there. Okay, so thank you for that, Tyler. So we're talking about now your op-ed here promoting the study. And let me just give a little bit of context. So when I got into political stuff, I was originally thought of myself as a conservative, then I moved to libertarianism. In the, let's say, late 80s, early 90s, people who are budget hawks are always warning about, hey, Social Security and these other entitlements, they're actuarially unsound, and they would give all these distant dates about when bad things and when the chickens would start coming home to roost. But I just want people to realize we are already there. So this is an excerpt, Tyler, from your op-ed. Everyone knows Social Security is broken. The program has been paying out more than it takes in since 2021, and the latest projections have the Social Security Trust Fund depleted by 2033. After that date, it will only pay 79% of scheduled benefits if significant changes aren't made. And I also want to add an addendum there. When you say, Tyler, that the Social Security program has been paying out to beneficiaries more than it takes in since 2021, there you're even including the income earned on the so-called Social Security Trust Fund. If you just look strictly speaking at the money taken out of payroll, in terms of payroll, quote, contributions to Social Security and the outgoing beneficiary checks, there is a mismatch, I think, going back to like 2009. If not the year before, the Great Recessions.
Actually, I have an earlier op-ed that I wrote, I believe in 2014, and I referenced that mark was hit in 2010. I have that actually in this other document. So in terms of just, cash flowing the payroll tax to the beneficiaries, then broke in 2010. In terms of drawing down, or in terms of insolvency, in terms of gross income, it's 2021. So
great.
It's broke however you want to calculate.
Yes. And just for people to make sure, I think probably most of the listeners understand this, but because of tweaks that were made in the early 80s under the Reagan administration that actually increased the tax and so forth, there was a long period where the Social Security Fund was having surpluses. In other words, there was more flowing in from payroll contributions that was going out in beneficiary checks. And so the Treasury, of course, was just taking it and spending it. But in terms of the accounting, they were giving Treasury securities to the Social Security Trust Fund, just like a private corporation. If it had surpluses and wanted to get into fixed income, safe bonds, that's what they could do. And so that's what the so-called trust fund is. So that built up over time in terms of the accounting. And so the Social Security program, in isolation from the rest of the federal budget, had this big stockpile. Intro, what is your solution?
Well, my thinking on this let me give you some genesis on this. So I teach a little unit on government tax and taxation and spending in my principles macro class, which I've been teaching since 2010, 2011. So probably 14, 15 years. And I update the data. Here's the top things the government's spending. Here's the government debt. I show them the U.S. government debt clock. And here's the top things that are driving that debt. And what is it? Of course, we all know this. Social Security, Medicare, defense are the three big ones. Sadly, now defense just got edged out by interest on the debt as number 3. And interest on the debt just passed the $1 trillion mark, which is frightening. But Social Security is still there for a single program as the number one driver, the number one top government spending item. So Social Security is the main driver of deficits and debt. And think what you will about Social Security. I kind of have a moral objection to it on these grounds. People like my parents who are, I'm going to call them upper middle class. My dad was very successful in business. He did construction. He owns a lot of rental properties. He's still involved in business with my brother. They build, they have rentals. Well off. Okay, let's say that. And my mother has a pension from the state of Colorado. My father had a little retirement business. He had a ranch with cattle. So they don't need checks from the government. But I go and tell my students that my mom and dad wanted to say, thanks for paying payroll taxes. I'll query the students. Show of hands. How many people have a job right now? Half of the hands go up. How many people think you will have a job someday? All the hands go up. Well, I said, my mom and dad wanted to say thanks for paying payroll taxes to fund their retirement. And of course, their healthcare. They're both on Medicare as well now. So that's just not right. It's not right to tax the current generation. And then in my op-ed, I said, my oldest daughter recently just got married and moved out. Thankfully, 1 down, 3 to go. But now she's working and paying taxes. Her husband's working and they're paying payroll taxes for the money to be taken out of their pocket. They're 20 years old and just getting started, and money's getting pulled out of their pocket and handed over to their grandparents who are well off. That's not right. That bothers me. So I came to the conclusion early on that, boy, if they would just let me reject the benefits, I would take that. It's like, I'll tax death and taxes, can't change that. But let me walk away from the benefits. Let me just be a moral leader. Well, probably not worth writing legislation, right? Because how many people would do that? Me and 38 others. So that's not going to make a dent in anything. But then I got to thinking, well, and I think maybe this was inspired by President Trump, art of the deal, got to be something in it for everybody. So what if they did a deal? And then I discovered this concept of pension buyouts. My sister-in-law asked me to do some math in a spreadsheet regarding a it wasn't a buyout per se, but it was like a buy-in, gets a change in your pension benefits in exchange for paying a lump sum right now. They tweak the benefits because it improves the fiscal situation of the pension entity, pension entity. So that kind of got my gears started. And I said, what if we could do some kind of buyout for Social Security? Because corporations will do buyouts, say like a GM that's got these huge unfunded pension obligations. They know they're going to have all these retirees. They've got these rich union-supported pensions, and they know that that's going to bankrupt them. So they say, look, they sit down with the employees who are either maybe on the cusp of retirement or close to retirement. Look, we need to tweak the pension obligation, but we'll make it worth your while. Usually what they do is they give them a lump sum that then the person can then take and have full control of and go invest and just control and use on their own. Or they can kind of close out their own obligations and shunt it off to a competent financial firm that's going to handle an annuity and know how to run it and make it stable. So companies have been doing this for decades. And I didn't go into detail in my white paper, but I cited that literature. So that's the inspiration for the idea of the buyout. So with Social Security, well, a lump sum would probably cost the government too much. It would just be a cash flow disaster. So the idea is the same. Take the obligation off of the government's books. So in other words, when I turn 67, they don't owe me anything. I'm walking away. I don't want the checks. I don't want the Social Security checks. Well, how do I come out ahead? They've got to give me something. Then I said, well, I wonder if the math would work on this because I'm 44. So I've got 23 years. What if they just cut my payroll tax just a little bit every year? And then I promise to invest that in the stock market. And I ran the math in the spreadsheet. And it turns out that I think there's a wide range of possible deals we could make where we trim that payroll tax down a little bit each year. I promise to invest it. And I'm actually going to come out ahead once I turn 67 with that money I invested on my own versus what I was scheduled to get in Social Security benefits. So it's a win-win. Now, for the government, it's also going to be a win-win in the long run. For Social Security as a program, it's a win-win in the long run. Because if people start doing this right now, well, in let's say 15 years, you'll have a growing number of people who are no longer receiving Social Security checks. And so the spending can be, there would be a nice drawdown in Social Security spending in the future. Right now, because I need something to incentivize me to opt out, to take a buyout, there would be a negative cash flow hit. But my argument is that it's going to be a relatively small negative cash flow hit right now in order to save the system in the long run, because you'd have a huge positive cash flow. You'd have like this tsunami of positive cash flow results that comes in the future. And in present value terms, which is how the actuaries or the trustees who run those reports, they want to think about these things in present value terms. In present value terms, it would solve the problem right now if we got it. If there's a threshold of people we need to get out. I don't know the exact number, but my back of the envelope estimate is 20%. We get 20% of people out now, it becomes long run solvent, even though it's going to be cash flow negative into the near-term future. I don't know if that was too technical, and I don't know how much you want to get into the numbers, but
okay, so that's great. So yeah, I did want to give you a chance, and like I said to you, Tyler, beforehand, and folks, I had done a proposal. We'll link to all this stuff, both Tyler's study and then the earlier thing I had done. Mine was more, it wasn't like a full-blown study. It was just a thing I did for Econ Lib, but I had done a proposal. And mine came out back when interest rates were at rock bottom levels, like treasury rates. And so that was the context there. It made particularly good sense to do it from a fiscal perspective when the government could basically borrow at 1% or something. So yeah, so big picture, and this is just for the folks at home here, Ty, I know you know this, but let me just try to give people a framework to understand what's going on. So there's a sense in why is Social Security in trouble and Medicare too? It's because they're a Pago system. And so
also known as the Ponzi scheme.
Yes. And so
it's been said, it's true. I mean, let's be frank about it.
Right. And even Paul Samuelson and Paul Krugman referred to it as either a Ponzi scheme or in one column Krugman said, and because of Social Security's Ponzi game aspect or something. And then later people were pointing to that and he was like, oh, I just meant, so yes, there is the element. And so that's the issue. What they mean is, right, that when the program started, there was benefit checks going to people right away. And then the way it worked is the current generation of workers has money taken out of their paychecks. It's not that the government goes and invests that in a sovereign wealth fund and it accumulates it, and that when they turn 65 or 67, these assets have grown over time the way like a privately funded pension plan, if it's run properly would
or
do.
Your 401k or your IRA.
Right, where there's like a longitudinal, like you just follow that cohort of workers and then their particular savings were growing over time. And then, so in that kind of a system, demographic changes don't matter, right? In a system where it's each entity funds its own future retirement benefits, you're fine, right? Even if it's like a group thing, you could have life insurance stuff, like, what I mean? So it's not that, different things can happen, but like as long as the group as a whole is setting aside assets that grow over time, it doesn't matter if the birth rate declines or whatever, that's fine. But in a Pago system where the money that's taken out of the current generations of workers' paychecks is just used to fund current retirement benefits that then, gets spent at the grocery store and paying rent or whatever, there's not like a growing stockpile of assets. It just keeps getting consumed as you go along. And so that can only work so long as the demographics stay appropriate, or if the next generation always keeps getting bigger than the prior one, then it can work too, because you always have a growing number of workers.
For a while.
Right. But that didn't happen, obviously. So I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but when I had done that study, like the number of workers per retiree in 1950 was a lot higher than it is right now, and higher than it's going to be 10 years from now as the population ages. And so that's kind of the fundamental problem. And so one way to think about what Social Security does, it's like the government's basically at gunpoint forcing all of today's workers to invest in a government-run retirement program that gives them a very low rate of return. In terms of if you do the value of like, okay, here's my contributions, and then what are the benefits they're promising me, and you run the math on that, it's not a very attractive program. And so that's why there's this opportunity, as Tyler is saying, if instead you had the option of taking the money, instead of giving it to the government in exchange for them saying, oh, we're going to start when you're 67 or whatever it is, start paying you this stream of benefits. If you took that money that right now is being taken into the Social Security program and you could go invest it in a 401k or something, you're probably going to have a lot more money because the rate of return on that alternate investment is going to be so much better. So I'll stop there, but I just want to kind of give people the framework of like, how is this possible that there could be a win-win?
Yeah, it is kind of complicated. So I'm trying to be really patient with people who, when I tell them the idea, they freak out. It's like, well, hang on, let me tell you the rest of it. There's several moving parts. So I had some fun comments on publishing those op-eds, and I wanted to address, okay, so yeah, you're better off taking the money, just some. It's a small slice. Overall payroll tax is 12.6. Does that sound right? Of which 12.6%, of which half of that is the worker and half of that's the company. Of the worker share, 5.3 is the Social Security old age part. Because there's several parts of this, right? There's the old age part, and then there's the hospital part, which is Medicare, and then there's the disability part, right? So it's the whole program's called OASDI, Old Age Survivors Disability Insurance. And then there's Medicare separately, but the taxes are all lumped together into the payroll tax. So complicated there. So we're talking about only the workers' part of the old age tax, which is 5.3%. And the way I ran this initially, and like I said, there's a lot of room to make a different deal because people don't like the numbers. So let's just negotiate over the numbers, right? Just phase that out over 10 years. So 0.53% per year. So it goes from 5.3 to 4.8 to 4.3. And I take that money and I invest it. The money that I would have paid in payroll tax. And there's certainly a mechanism, we could include it in the tax returns to verify that I'm putting it into my IRA and investing it in the stock market. So I'm assuming a 7% real rate of return on that investment. And Bob, you can tell me what you think about that. I think that's a pretty standard assumption in terms of an annual compound average growth rate of broad-based U.S. stock index funds. And as I said, I've got 20 plus years. Now, of course, I might not be investing at 100% in stocks towards the end of that, but that's probably not going to alter them all that much. And I come out ahead in a present value sense, meaning I ran a projection, then I actually went to the Social Security site because you can do a calculator. And I said, okay, here's what, based on you type in your Social Security number, you make an account. Okay, here's how many quarters you have. Here's your status. Here's what you're projected to get at retirement if you retire at full retirement age or whatever. So I took that number. Okay, I kind of estimated my life expectancy. I kind of did that myself based on my family history rather than Social Security has all these actuarial tables. When I did just a general model, I used Social Security actuarial table. But I'm going to be getting Social Security benefits for let's say like 25 years. If we want to get into the actual math, I can find it. So I would be getting, actually, I'm going to open my spreadsheet and refer to this just so I can have some actual numbers. I would be getting, according to what Social Security's website told me, about $41,000 a year. And I ran that for 18 years of retirement. And so I'm paying however many $1,000 in tax, but we're going to reduce that. I'm going to invest it. I'm going to invest the first batch of it's going to get invested for 23 years because I'm 44 right now. The second batch gets invested for 22, 20, 21. So I calculate all this in the spreadsheet. I come up with the total accumulated future value. Well, it's $270,000. And then I take the present value of the payment and income stream with what's going on, what is currently scheduled with Social Security. Then I say, what about the present value of me getting nothing from Social Security? Just let's take the present value of the money I invest and accumulates to $270,000. Well, I'm looking at my spreadsheet right now. My present value goes from negative $20 to $23,000. That's called a win. That's a win. I'm wealthier by $23,000. So I'm going to take that deal. Now, I know the finance and I understand the math on this. People who don't, they might think it's some kind of magic trick and they might be freaked out. So here's the better part of my plan, I think, is this. You don't have to take the buyout, voluntary. If this scares you, if you want Social Security, and I mean it, if you like your Social Security, you can keep your Social Security. I don't want to make any changes to anything. The taxes, the retirement age, the wage base, nothing. And I think that's my idea there, is to make it as politically easy as possible. No changes unless you want to opt out, and then you better do the math. And maybe we can talk about this, some criteria for who's allowed to do it. If you want to make sure, if you want to be paternalistic, I'm pretty libertarian. I would say let anyone who wants to opt out, let them take their chance. It's supposed to be a free country. But if you want to be paternalistic, okay, we can have some tests. We could have a wealth test. You have to have so much money in tax qualified retirement plans. You have to have a certain income. There's a mechanism to ensure that the amount you save on payroll taxes is actually invested. Okay, yeah, we could put a bunch of strictures on that to make sure that we don't have a bunch of people recklessly opting out and then pissing away the tax savings and then winding up poor in old age. But it is actually a win-win deal, and it involves no changes unless you want them. So that's kind of my pitch.
Yeah, it's interesting how much we both kind of landed on very similar ideas, because I had the same mechanism in the proposal I had put forth is just to reassure people, as I said, look, this is completely voluntary in the sense you can do the current thing because of what I'm giving, what I'm coming up with are ways that it's a win-win. And so, yeah, if you disagree and something scares you, then fine, just stay with the current system. I'm just giving people the ability to opt out of it. And again, just to make sure people understand the mechanism here, maybe instead of doing the present discounted value calculations, maybe a different way of seeing it is just, you're saying, Tyler, it's your mid-40s, you're going to renounce the cash flow, the benefit payments that Social Security right now says it owes you. And then they're going to give you a break. So the same amount is coming out of your paycheck. It's just, you get to take some of it instead of sending it to Washington. You're diverting some of it into the account of your choice.
Exactly.
And then that's going to grow. And because and then by the time that thing grows, by the time you hit 67, that thing will have grown into such a pile of money that then you start drawing down on that, and you will, running the calculations and projections, you will have more available, like the annuity that pile of money could fund for you is going to be bigger than right now what Social Security is promising you in terms of retirement.
And of course, just a little reduction in the payroll taxes, and I invest that's not going to be enough to fund my retirement. So this is presuming we're talking about a pool of people who's already been saving and investing off the ground. So we're probably talking about, in my white paper, I'm kind of suggesting this is for the top quintile of earners probably. This is for people who are, pretty financially astute, have a IRA, have a 401k. Yeah, I'm in the nonprofit sector university here. I've got 403B. I also do construction in the summer, so I've got a SEP from that. Mm-hmm. My wife has an IRA from a previous employer. I have a self-directed IRA. I'm investing in private equity. So I'm fully prepared. Like that, for me, this is a no-brainer. I'm financially pretty well educated. For people who don't know and can't do it, let's leave Social Security for them. That's fine.
Right.
I don't have my moral objection for Social Security is mostly that we're taxing the poor or the lower income folks to give a huge chunk of that money to upper income folks. So I'm thinking that's kind of a populist way of thinking about it. It might be popular with people on the left as well as the populist right. But in Social Security, we can't eliminate Social Security. Let's be realistic here. It's very popular. It's well entrenched, and we could talk about the public choice dynamics. I kind of reference this in my white paper. It's a large interest group, but it's still very concentrated benefits for that. It's a relatively large interest group. It's basically every old person in the country. But there's still the interest group dynamics where we're concentrating the benefits of that program on a relatively small group of people and spreading out the cost amongst not just all federal income taxpayers, but all people with a payroll job, right? So that's a larger base. Because there are people who are paying payroll taxes, but they don't pay federal income tax because their income's too low, but they're paying payroll tax on every dollar of their income. There are people who receive Social Security checks who only paid payroll tax on the first, right now it's $168,000, the wage base. Social Security, and I've always been shocked, and I always mention this in my classes, I'm always shocked that Democrats aren't howling about the fact that the payroll tax is regressive.
Right.
Because it only Social Security part. Now the hospital part does apply to all of it, but the Social Security, the OASDI only applies right now. It's $168,600, I believe. If you're a mid to high six figures earner, you're actually not paying Social Security tax on the bulk of your earning or big chunk to possibly the bulk of your earnings. Isn't that crazy? Democrats make this progressive. And that is a proposal to fix it. I'm thinking, well, that doesn't fix the whole thing, but if we needed to make a deal politically, maybe we could combine an opt-out with a elimination or a raising of the wage base, something for the libertarian wackos to like and something for the bleeding heart progressives to like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to that.
Yeah. Just to make sure everyone caught that. So again, folks, for the mechanics, you're right now, the way it works and has worked historically, the payroll contribution on your, and again, I'm saying, I'm not going to keep doing the air quotes, but contribution is a loaded term there. The tax to fund your Social Security payment it maxes out up to a certain level of income, and then it caps out. And then also, when you retire, the amount of benefit payments you receive, even though they say strictly speaking, it's not like there's an account with your name on it, like it's just a schedule of payments and so forth, and there's no promise. It's not like you have a contract with the Social Security Administration. They can change it at will. But in terms of the formulas they use, people who historically had a higher income are also going to get a higher benefit check, right? And so I think it might have been Milton Friedman, I can't remember, but somebody one time, just to piggyback on what you said there, Tyler, said, it's funny that the leftist progressives really like Social Security so much when it's a regressive tax combined with a regressive payment system. And yet, you put those two together, and then that's this program that's sacrosanct.
I'm not sure that the payout part is fully regressive, and I haven't studied that quite as much, but there is a cap in terms of benefits. So if you're a big earner, if you're like an upper six or maybe seven figure earner, there is a cap on the monthly benefit payout.
Okay, but I mean, still, the richer people get a higher, it caps out, but in general, you get paid a higher benefit check from Social Security the more money you made in your career.
Fast. So the sweet spot, people who actually come out ahead from Social Security are actually kind of probably lower middle class or working class people, because they will see a larger absolute retirement income from Social Security. That makes sense?
Yeah.
But you said something about the contributions. I think it's worth making a comment on that. Social Security calls it contributions because they want to make it sound like it's either an insurance scheme or a retirement pension fund. So
right.
We make contributions and we are the custodians of that, and we have a fiduciary duty, and we invest it and we give you the income. So there's almost this con game. I think it's pretty overt, where Social Security talks about these are your contributions and these are your benefits. Well, you'll know this, Bob. There's 2 Supreme Court cases that have established very clearly that it's not contributions, it's a tax like any other. Hence the quote, the rating of the quote trust fund. It's just a tax like any other, and Congress can spend it on whatever it wants. So there's this kind of mythology of Social Security being a pension fund, but that's a lie. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yep.
It's important to address that.
Oh, definitely. And then, okay, so I think people, we walked them through, they understand the sense in which it can make, from the point of view, especially from upper middle class earners, it would make sense to renounce their benefits in exchange for even just keeping a portion of the go forward pay, things that would have been taken out of their paycheck anyway.
Yep.
And so it's a win for them. So then someone say, okay, well, there's got to be a catch. And you alluded to it, but just to walk people through that, I want to have you just elaborate on it. So what would happen in terms of the cash flowing is, from the government's point of view, in an accounting sense, clearly they would be better off, anyone who chooses to do this, because from the government's point of view, the person's still paying in, just not as much. And now the government has that liability completely off their books. Oh, in exchange for us not having to pay you anything once you retire, and you're still going to keep paying in, and all the money you already did pay in, that's ours to keep. So clearly the government benefits in an accounting, balance sheet perspective,
Like,
from anybody who exercises. But from the problem is the cash flow perspective, that right now, if Tyler and other people start opting out, that's money that would have flown into the government's coffers that now is not flowing in. And so given that they're already underwater in terms of how much they have to pay, so what would happen is, in the accounting sense, more of the quote unfunded liabilities of the whole that Social Security is in an accounting actuarial sense right now, that would go down, but the explicit treasury debt would go up, because they would, right now, the official budget deficit would be higher than it otherwise would have been.
It's a question I've been thinking about that a lot, because I know if we advance anywhere politically, that's the thing I'm going to have to, or whoever maybe helps me out with this is going to have to answer. And so I'm trying to work on some kind of back the envelope calculations here, but it's really tricky because there's so many moving parts. There's these age cohorts, but I think if we sign up 1 million people, the government's going to take a cash flow hit of $5, 10, 15, $20 billion a year. But that's in order to wipe hundreds of billions of like you said, it wipes those long-term liabilities off the book. So maybe an analogy would be helpful. Let's say you have a mortgage, you have a 30-year mortgage. Well, no, let's say you have a balloon mortgage. You're paying interest only, and in 5 years, let's just say it's $1 million. You got to either pay it off or refinance it in 5 years. But what if I could wipe off that $1 million balloon payment and get you free and clear if you paid an extra, I don't know, $20,000 a year or $50,000 a year? That'd be a good deal, right? For the next 5 years.
Right.
Even though I'm going to hurt your cash flow in the short term, I'm going to improve your situation tremendously in the long term. So that's the kind of thing. For the taxpayers, the deal should be pretty obvious. I've renounced Social Security, but because I'm going to be forced to invest the difference I save in taxes, I will come out ahead if I invested wisely. And like I said, the kind of people who would be in a position to take this buyout, they're going to know about that. They're probably the people with a lot of IRAs and 401ks already. They're the people who want to invest. They're the people like, yeah, let me out. Because I throw this out there to people. I could probably almost predict your income by your response to this. If you respond like, yeah, let me out, you're probably a 6-figure person with a lot of IRAs and stuff. And if you're scared, you probably don't know the finance. And that's not a judgment, that's just different people know different things. So yeah, would you take a deal, even though for the taxpayer, it's obvious, for the government, there is that hurdle to get over, it's going to hurt their cash flow a little bit in the short run, but it makes the system solvent in the long run. So I think that's the appeal.
And also
a bit more of a $2 trillion deficit right now. It's going to be 2.05 trillion.
Right. And another wild card too, I don't know if you've considered, is because when I was dealing with that issue too, when I was doing the back of the envelope stuff, if conceivably there could be people where maybe just the math works that in order for them to opt out and to leave the government a net beneficiary, they would have to not merely renounce their future benefits. Like I guess probably for like younger people, this would be true. So the benefit stream the government's paying them is so far in the future that the present value is not very high. So they might actually have to just write a check also to opt, you know what I mean? And so depending on the numbers, it's possible that the lump sums that they pay to just opt out is enough to cover the short-term financing, from the other people.
And I hadn't thought of that in particular, but I'm open to any kind of bargaining here. Mm-hmm. One thing that you could do that I did think about, and I kind of modeled a little in my spreadsheets is, well, for younger workers, the younger you are and relatively high income, the better this deal is because you have more time to invest that tax savings. Mm-hmm. So what we could do with them to make the numbers work a little bit better in the cash flow is just, well, okay, if you sign up for the opt-out, you don't get the tax reduction. We'll just kick the tax reduction back 5 years or 10 years. Mm-hmm. But you're still scheduled to get it and you commit to investing it and you'll still come out ahead. So we can just bargaining out and negotiating out the amount of the tax break, the scheduling of the tax break. And then like you said, we could throw in, you could gen a lump sum payment. That would be more that would be a typical pension planning type thing. That would be a buy up type thing. Mm-hmm. But in this case, you write a check so you can buy out. There's all kinds of bargains that could be made to make this work. And I'm open to anything. If this ever got to Congress, my goal would just be, I'm looking at my spreadsheet and I say, okay, it's like whatever we do with these numbers, as long as the present value goes up, mm-hmm. It goes up by $10,000, $1,000, I'm going to come out ahead and I'm going to feel good about not, on behalf of Social Security, stealing money from my daughter and son-in-law when I don't need it because I invested and I'm financially well off.
Yeah, exactly. And again, just for people when they're trying to say where's the free lunch here? One way of seeing it is that it depends how old you are and everything. But if you just Google right now and say, what's the internal rate of return on Social Security? It'll say the real rate, something like 1% to 2%. So if you're throwing at 2%, that's 2 to 4% with inflation. So you can clearly beat that even in a very conservative retirement account. So that's partly where this is coming.
Nice chart in my white paper and it's from a guy named Michael Kitces, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who is a financial planner. And he's got the numbers and he crunched the numbers. And the internal rate of return, I'm looking at his chart right now, is respectable for people about age 55 and up. Well, that's because we're calculating that rate of return forward looking. In other words, all taxes you paid in the past are sunk and they drop out of the analysis. So if you're 55 right now, looking forward to you're going to get a Social Security check in 12 years and you've only got to pay taxes for 12 more years, you win. So you're not going to want out unless you have some kind of huge moral issue about it. And maybe a few people will, but mm-hmm. If you're 45, internal rate of return for higher earners is about 4%. And that's low earners. Sorry, for lower earners, it's about 4%. And for higher earners, it's either 0 or negative 1 or 2%. So when you average that out, the median internal rate of return, it's what was the number you gave? 1 or 2%?
Yeah, and that was a real figure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's average, right?
Well, it was just given a single number. Yeah.
For some specific people, it's actually negative.
Right.
And those are the people who are going to be attracted to the buyout.
Exactly. Okay, so I think we've let people see how this could work and what's driving it and the better. So now let's just flip it and do let me play devil's advocate and just see some obvious concerns people might have. So one thing would just be the paternalistic aspect and say the whole reason we have this program in the first place is what if people don't prepare for their retirement adequately? We're not just going to let them starve to death. And so you can't just let people do it on their own. And I guess you're partly just because you already anticipated to say you're still good. It's not you can take the money and just spend it on vacations. You're saying you do have to put it into some kind of qualified retirement plan. So you're right.
And so you could still, and I was a little vague on this, but we could get into details. In the paper, I just said we'll have a pledge, we'll have a mechanism to guarantee that the amount that the taxes are reduced by is going to go into a tax qualified plan. So an IRA of some stripe. Now you could still blow your money in an IRA. You could invest in some harebrained stuff. So we could tighten that up if we needed to. If they said, well, Watts, we don't trust you and we really want to make sure you're not going to go broke and come crawling back on your hands and knees saying, please let me back into Social Security. All right, just make me buy an annuity. Just make me buy an annuity that replaces Social Security. I think Social Security is scheduled to give me $40,000, $50,000 a year. I'm 44 years old right now, so I could probably get an annuity. You might know the numbers on this, Bob. I'd probably get an annuity and almost pay for it with my tax savings, or maybe a little bit of my own wealth too. And so I could lock into an annuity that replaces the income part of Social Security. And then with the rest of my wealth, I just invest on my own and try for the best. Now I'm a random walk down Wall Street, Burke, Malkiel, efficient market hypothesis kind of guy. I'm just parking it in this broadest base, lowest cost mutual fund I can find. So and get the stock market rate of return. For better
but again, we're being just trying to be realistic. Obviously, a radical libertarian would say, hey, let people do what they want and let the chips fall where they may. But if we are going to say we're just going to try to unwind this thing, so the paternalistic aspect could still be there. We're saying, we're still insisting that everybody devote a certain portion of their income into retirement funding. It's just
you might need to have a paternalistic plank in there to get the bleeding heart Democrats and the squish Republicans in Congress to approve it and say, I'd rather have a buyout than not have a buyout. I'm very pragmatic politically. Right. So, okay, that's what we need. That's what we need. It's fine.
And also there is the danger too that, I don't want Congress micromanaging investment funding because they'd be all political. But like you're saying, there are such things as quote tax qualified retirement plans already. So it's not like this is a huge laissez-faire environment.
Yeah, and there's an annuity market too. So if you want to force me to go, there's a very competitive market and I'll go buy an annuity. I'd much rather buy and own my own annuity than have this money taken out of my paycheck and pissed away by Congress, right?
Right. Okay, so another one I could see being an objection from people who are more cynical and kind of understand the finances here is they might say, you're right, Tyler. If the government actually planned on paying everybody's promised Social Security benefits, your plan would make sense. But we all know in practice what's going to happen is they're just going to drastically reduce it and say, now you can retire at age 69 and we're going to tighten the screw. So in other words, by in a sense moving those liabilities away from the unfunded part into explicit treasury debt, if in the short term they got to borrow more to fund the cash flow, that's only quote saving the government money if they were actually going to honor those obligations, but they weren't. They were just going to claw them back anyway. And so they could say, this actually hurts the government, given what in practice they were going to do.
Well, okay, so I guess I hadn't thought about that one. That's fun though. I guess I would say to that argument, I'd say, okay, tell me the mechanism by which either the Social Security retirement age gets raised, payroll taxes get increased, or Social Security benefits get explicitly cut. Tell me the mechanism. Congress has to vote on that. And I would say they are not going to vote. They would sooner explicitly monetize that debt than vote on a reduction in Social Security benefits. Old people vote. That's the dynamic that's driving this. You probably remember, was it 2010 when Paul Ryan proposed very modest changes to the cost of living adjustment formula? And I tell my students this, they probably don't even know these names anymore, but President Obama actually endorsed it. I'm like, wow, that's the most fiscally conservative thing Obama ever did. And it was basically changing the COLA, the Social Security cost of living adjustment formula, from like 1.5% to 1.3%. I don't know the exact number, but it was very, very modest because they were going to change from CPI to chain CPI. Does that sound right? Do you remember that, Bob?
It was, yes, I don't remember the exact details.
Right. To the way they were going to calculate cost of living adjustment. And the AARP just came out with the pitchforks and torches. And that's when they had the ads of Republicans pushing Granny off the cliff in the wheelchair. And you will not win politically going up against the world's strongest and most motivated and most focused interest group. Old people vote. So I would challenge them. I'd say, I can't see, sometime in the future, they would have to make changes because, no, they don't actually. They could just keep spending and then, just like we're doing now, monetize the debt. I think that's way more likely given the political dynamics. But
okay, interesting response. Yeah, like I said, I was asking you just because I know. In other words, like if you read Krugman or people like that, they acknowledge the actuarial realities and just say, they're going to just scale back the benefits a little bit, and it's a minor tweak. And, which is funny because if a private company did that with their pensions, they would be going nuts about violation of contract, and this is why you can't trust capitalism. But when the government does it,
let's say I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I know Tyler, and he'll stop drinking. Once he goes to the doctor and it says, hey, you got cirrhosis, he'll stop drinking. I might just die. I might just drink myself to death. Probably more. I don't want to be morbid about it, but that might be just as common as people, kind of like waking up and taking care of themselves. This is Congress. They're spending other people's money. They have no reason other than some kind of moral scruples about this. And there's a few who do, but overall the political dynamic is just to forge ahead with the spending until we get a literal financial crisis and until we get into a literal government debt crisis and interest rates triple. I would much more expect them to not make the adjustments.
And then I suppose the other thing I could see, and as you tweak this or whatever, that the more just in terms of the optics, if it comes off as, oh, this is a plan for which the well-to-do can opt out of Social Security and not pay as much into it. Because look at how much more they're going to make in the stock market. I just think a lot of people on the left are just going to instinctively smell a rat and say, no, I don't. That sounds like it's like, all the rich people taking their kids out of public schools and then the school funding goes to, anyway.
Yeah. And it's like, well, it's true. I'm not rich. I'm, let's say, middle class. But middle class and up would be the people who would opt out. And yeah, they're going to take the little sliver of taxes they save and invest in the stock market and come out ahead. But I guess the answer to that is just, and I'm going to renounce. I'm going to ask for $0 from your kids and my kids and grandkids. Sounds like the right thing to do for me.
Yep. Again, this kind of ties back to the earlier objection, because I think, unfortunately, for some people, they're saying, no, right now, what we're going to do is just take more from you and cut your benefit, do a means test. So yeah, we'll not pay you benefits because you don't need it because you have your 403B, and we're still going to take money from you. Actually, we're going to take more money from you and give it to people who need it. So that's how we fix it. You know what I mean? So
we can implement that kind of plan, though. We can preempt that because this is a means test in effect, but it's a voluntarily agreed upon means.
Right. Yeah.
Because everybody says this. I remember this is probably part of my inspiration for this. We got a means test entitlements. Yeah, we do. But there's no way that's going to fly politically. But what if we made the means test voluntary? What if I raise my hand and say, hey, I have the means, I'm testing out. Just give me some crumbs to make it work, make the numbers work.
And the last thing here, as we're talking about this, is there a reason, why wouldn't it work, especially for a younger, a blue collar worker? Wouldn't they still are going to make more in a IRA than they would from what Social Security is promising them, right? So is there a reason even lower income people wouldn't want to do this?
Activity of the benefits.
Okay.
Because I didn't run the math on this because I know I'm just looking at the chart of rates of return.
Right.
Those people have.
Okay, so that's what the issue is. And that's kind of why you were pushing back when I was saying what I had earlier.
I think
filed
also
away.
Those are the people who, even if they did do better at the margin of saving that tax and investing it, they are going to be way less likely to have pre-existing assets that would fund the bulk of retirement.
Right. Okay.
I'm in a position to take a buyout because I have pre-existing retirement assets.
Yep. And even just maybe to speak with a broad brush here, but culturally, right? If you're talking to people who they were Social Security was just going to be gravy, and they said, no, I'm planning on that just not being there, and I'm taking care. Whereas other people for which Social Security is that's my retirement, that's how I'm going to live.
Granted,
for them to have it taken away might seem scarier.
That's right. And I think there's a growing number of younger people who are coming to the realization Social Security is not going to be there.
Right.
Okay, well, hey, then you want to set yourself up for the opt-out, right? Maybe this could be kind of aspirational for those people. Well, I'm too scared to opt out because I don't have maybe a few $100,000 saved already. But hey, if I could get on board with my company's 401k, if I could set up an IRA, if I could get a side gig and start funding it myself, maybe in 5 years, I would be in a position for an opt-out. So maybe a 30 or 35-year-old workers, they're like, well, I'm not strong enough to opt out now, but boy, I would like to be in that position. So maybe this would accelerate their financial progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe that's an upside. Another upside ancillary benefit is that we're going to generate a lot at the margin, a flow of billions, maybe hundreds of billions. If a lot of people start opting out into the stock market or into other assets, there should be a boon on just the total market capitalization.
Yep. And the other benefit too is on the margin for a lot of people. If you're reducing the marginal tax rate effectively, you're presumably going to get more income generation. You know what I mean? Like if so,
Yep.
so there's that benefit as well, that your probably aggregate labor output's going to be higher if a lot of the most productive people are allowed to opt out.
Supply side economics.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up there. So folks, we'll link, of course, the show notes page to Tyler's study and an op-ed, maybe if you want to see a smaller version. Also, Tyler, is there anywhere you want to point them in terms of if they want to see more of what you do or what your organization does?
Well, the main thing I do is teach. I have a YouTube channel if people want to learn about Mangerian marginal value theory. But no, I write for various outlets. So you can find me at Daily Wire and Econ Blog, which is Liberty Fund's blog. Mainly check out my white paper. And I don't know what the best political maneuvers would be to promote it, but maybe just getting a lot of intelligent people talking about it is a good start. So I really appreciate you having me on here, because I know your audience has to be pretty astute to even care about this kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, so thanks for coming on. And yeah, we appreciate your effort and the promotion of it. And folks, I encourage you to check out his paper and pass it around to people who are interested, because hey, with this incoming Trump administration, there's a lot of stuff on the table that before would have been politically impossible. So Tyler, thanks again for your time.
Thank you very much, Bob. It's been a pleasure.
Been a pleasure as well. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.